Hi everyone, welcome back to Saathwic Infotech AWS learning series. So we are in our day 15 today, and as part of our today's session, we are going to see about AWS serverless concepts as well as demo followed by it. Probably today it will be like kind of a little bit of theory session, more about theory and a little bit of demo. In tomorrow's session, we will be implementing the same whatever we learned today with an use case. Okay, that's what I am planning for the whole demo. So, okay, before we start, let me tell something about what we seen yesterday in the last session, right? So, in the last session, I had a config. So, basically, I will name it as C. So, config is going to generate an event, okay, which is going to be consumed by event bridge. Let me put it as B, okay. So, once the event bridge is computed, it's going to put them in a bus where the rules whatever we created in the event bridge is going to validate the data which is coming in the bus and take necessary action. So to be in simple, so once the events are sent to event bridge, from event bridge we will validate against this to the rules what we create in the event bridge, and then we will trigger a SNS notification, which is nothing but an email notification. So far we have seen till this, okay, in our last session. Okay, so you can ask me like Kumar, like what is the relationship between like last session and today's session? Yes, there is a relationship because like whatever the concept which you are going to see today, serverless, in practical we have already seen it. What do you mean, Kumar? You always made a question, right? So if you look at all the service, okay, either like config or event bridge or SNS, did I have any server created here? Any EC2 machine is running here? Or do you own any EC2 machine? All these are services provided by AWS. Okay, we are just using it. Okay, it doesn't means that it does not have a server. It has a server which is completely managed by AWS, and it has been published to us as a service. Hope I am making sense, right? Okay, let me give you a small analogy so that you will understand. Okay, just want to give you the analogy so that it would be help you to remember at least. So, okay. Let's take today you're I am building an house. Okay, this is my house. Okay, basically this is a compound wall. Okay, it has a small gate here. Okay, it has a small gate here, and I have my home within it. Okay, let me put a home in a triangle shape. So this is my home. Okay, so basically I am the owner of this house where I have compounded it, and I have a small gate, and I have a small gate for my home too. Okay, that's fine. Okay, tell me here, who is the owner of this house? Okay, is that you? Correct. So you built the house, you brought the land, you constructed the house, you constructed the compound wall, you constructed everything. So you are the owner of it. So what is your responsibility here? Okay, your responsibility to safeguard your house, right? So that's why you compounded it. Okay. So when the house is yours, the responsibility completely lies on you. Okay. Do you guys agree? Okay, let's take the same scenario. Okay, let's assume I have constructed the house. I am the owner of this house. If I am letting it to you, okay, for example, I am letting this house to, or maybe let me remove this also. I don't want this to be there, compound wall to be there. Okay, so I have constructed a house, okay, and I am letting out for you, renting it for you. Okay, so as you are a tenant, okay, as you being a tenant, what are the responsibilities you take care? Okay, as a tenant, we whom for which you are using, right? You are going to pay a rent to me. So you are going to pay rent for the house. Okay, you can take care of minimal expenses. What is the minimal expenses you can take care? if something which is not working internally with your house, like for example, if you want to just configure, if you want to just add up a light, you can do it on your own because it's very minimal, and which is been privileged for you to do that, because I don't want someone to come in and fix in my house, right? I don't want to let the owner always come to my house and fix everything for me. So no, once I rent it, I will take care of it everything. Okay, once I gave for a rent, I will take care of everything. Okay, so let's take one more scenario here. Okay, now you additional take of security of this house. Okay, you will secure this house to some extent. Okay, what you can do, you can lock this gate. Okay, you will keep your gate always locked so that some unauthorized person does not enter. So that's a minimal security which you can take care for your house. Okay, for the security purpose, as a tenant, you cannot go and build a compounded wall. You guys agree? So now in our case with AWS, right, this what happens. Okay, so let me erase everything now. So what happens with AWS? Earlier, we used to have EC2 machine. Okay, what we do in the EC2? We take care of everything because this is my own land, because I am purchased this EC2 server by paying them AWS, right? So I paid some amount to purchase this EC2. Now it's my own responsibility to configure networking, okay, configure subnets, configure security group, and ensure who can come in, who can go out. So everything I need to take care. Okay, if something goes wrong with this EC2, it's again completely on me. Except the availability of the server, nothing much AWS take care of in this area. Okay, so now here you own everything. For example, okay. So before we get into serverless concept, let's try to understand this much better, right? So for example, like you are being a DevOps engineer, you have written an automation to validate the resources created in AWS without BU tag. So let's assume, okay, being a DevOps engineer, your responsibility that, okay, everybody, you need to take care of your own billings, right? You need to know who is using what. So what you have suggested, your all your application team is, any resource you create in AWS have the BU tag. Okay, they should have a BU tag so that you understand which BU actually consumes this EC2. Okay, so in order to get this automation executed, okay, you need a server. You cannot run this automation anywhere in the air. You need a server. So what you guys for may let's take you are a BU DevOps. Okay, as a DevOps team, what you did, you created this EC2. Okay, you created another EC2 to run this automation. Okay, it's scheduled every day, morning and evening. Okay, let's assume this particular script is going to run only in morning and evening. Let's take 5 minutes. It's going to run, because your account has huge volume of resources, so it's going to run for 5 minutes, once in morning and once in evening. Okay, so it's all good, right? So you have an EC2 and you have roles and everything, whatever you configure everything, and your script runs perfectly fine, and it generates a report. So as part of the objective is done. Okay, you get a report every day and you monitor everything perfectly fine and everything. Now comes, see, when you are in a cloud, okay, you need to make sure cost optimization. That's one more important factor which comes for any DevOps engineer or any resources. Okay, whoever is cloud user, their own responsibility is to perform the cost optimization, but it lies an additional side on the yeah, DevOps resource side. Okay, everybody should be like while designing their application, they should be considered, they should be like considering how much cost is going to incur while even designing the application itself. Okay, so but as a DevOps engineer, we are going to monitor it whether it's all like optimized. So if you look at your use case, so you are running the machine only 5 minutes in the morning and only 5 minutes in the evening. Okay, so but your EC2 is running all the time, correct? So in this case, how much you charged for? So you will be charged for this EC2 which is running for whole day. Okay, and the underlying storage where your script is getting saved, because you need some storage to save the script. Okay, and the ram and the memory capacity. So how much type of what type of instance you have opted for. So because like if you want to run your job in 5 minutes, then it should be like kind of like T2 micro or MX large, 4X large, whatever you want to use, right? So based on your requirement, you might have selected the EC2 type. So based on the EC2 type, again your cost varies. Okay, now so you are thinking that okay, how to reduce the cost of all these things here. Okay, no, if I want to reduce the cost of all these things, there is an way to do that, right? So what you can do, okay, what you guys can do here, any idea? Okay, now you guys are doing like something like this. Okay, hey Kumar, like I have a IAC, infrastructure as a code. So what I will do, I just create my EC2 instance once in morning, once in evening, using the infrastructure as code, which is very easy to me. Okay, again you are paying up for EC2 and the instance type and that storage and everything. So here also like you have some additional cost, but again the cost when you compare to this is lesser than to this newer approach, where what you do, you will be building out the newer server, building new server when and where needed. Okay, so as we are not into the containerization and other part, I don't want to get into those topics, like okay, so I'm just speaking in terms of server, because like we are yet to go to that level. Okay, so you can create the server, because like here the main drawback is your server is up and running from morning to evening. So here what you are doing, you are reducing that part. Your server is going to run once in morning and the other server is going to run in evening. So what is the challenge you have? So the challenge is like okay, configuring your server, because like every time you build your new server, you get a different IP address where you need to do additional configuration like ALB or something to map those new servers and everything. And again the scalability part, one more important, very important part is scalability. So you need to ensure that scalability part is done, and the configuration part, security part, everything you need to take care. So again, even though you reduce certain amount, again you are adding up few more complexities here. Okay, great. So for in order to avoid, what is a better solution AWS provide is, AWS provide us certain services as serverless. Okay, means it's not real serverless. We need to understand, guys, when we say serverless, it's not real serverless. It means that in both the use cases, right, in here or here, we need to take care of everything. Okay, the server, whatever we spin, the whole responsibility lies on us, whether to manage the life cycle of these servers, either creating, deleting, everything. If you forget to delete, it's going to charge you like anything. Probably you might end up in selling out all your assets. Okay, so it's all the responsibility lies on us. But what AWS says is, hey guys, like I will give you certain services, okay, which you can use for your purposes. Okay, and whenever it's not needed, okay, I am going to charge you only for the usage. Okay, which is what I was looking at, right? I don't want to bear all the CC2 costs and everything. So AWS says that okay, there are many services I provide you which take care of like okay, charging you only for your usage. See, for example, if you are using the server for 5 minutes, pay for your usage alone. You don't want to take care of your network, your security, everything. Your remaining all the part like scalability, high availability, everything I will take care. It's all my responsibility. So what AWS call those as, okay, serverless, in which all the servers are managed by AWS, where you do not even have a clue where your project is currently running. They have some charges, okay, for serverless services, where you need to just pay for that and you will be free. You just do your core work. You don't want to end up in managing the services, everything. Okay, so that's where, right, if you look at our AWS config or event bridge or SNS notification or queue, whatever is being used in AWS, it's all serverless. Even your S3, we are using S3 as a storage, right? But do we have any server? No, we don't have any server for S3, but we are still using it as a storage. How come? Okay, means that behind the scene, AWS manages the server and underlying architecture, underlying replication, high availability, scalability, everything was managed by AWS. Okay, so hope I made at least to an extent I made very clear on serverless concept. Okay, you need to keep in mind that okay, serverless is not that real serverless. The server will be managed by AWS completely, and we do not have any clue on the server. As a user, we just consume it and pay for what we consume, similar to your tenant. Okay, you are tenanting an house, you just pay for the period you stay in the house. Nothing much you are going to pay. You are not going to pay for constructing a security boundary wall or compound wall for your house and everything, right? Nothing. Everything will be taken care by the owner of the house. You just pay for what you stay. Okay, the same concept here. So in serverless, I think we have discussed about many services, but today whatever we are going to see is a very very important service called Lambda. Okay, so this particular service will be very 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 highly important, okay, for a DevOps engineer, for a data engineer, as well as for a platform engineers. Okay, everybody who uses AWS, they will be aware of Lambda, and they will be using one or the other places. So that's much important this service is. Okay, it's like a automatically scalable service, highly available service. Okay, which is like supported by AWS, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so there are few key points you need to remember. Okay, Lambda can do everything for you. Okay, even you can write APIs within Lambda using some other new, I think there is some frameworks released by AWS recently, around 10 months back. With that, you can even make Lambda as an API as well. Okay, API calls also can Lambda can handle. Okay, so let's look at very simple example and we'll go into much detail. Okay, whenever you think about Lambda, okay, in interview perspective, we do ask multiple questions. Okay, so Lambda, how does Lambda get triggered? So when you look at interview, we generally ask this question: how does Lambda get triggered? Okay, or what is the, when you think about Lambda, what are the important things you keep in mind? Okay, so basically Lambda cannot run on its own. Okay, Lambda is just a piece of code. You keep it in the server. When you keep some code on the server, does it run automatically? No. There should be something behind it to start executing it, right? Either you should use cron tab or control M or auto sys or whatever the scheduler you have. You need to have some scheduler to make it run, or there should be something else to make it run. So basically Lambda needs a trigger. Okay, trigger, that's a mandatory part. Okay, trigger can be like multiple ways. Either you explicitly specify a trigger or you can just call it from the other services also. So it needs a trigger. So the second important question which I specifically ask in interview questions, okay, how does Lambda get an input and in what form? So how does Lambda gets an input and in what form? So basically this is another question which I ask generally to the people, because as I said, Lambda is serverless, okay, and it's just a service. Okay, when you use this service, how does it gets an input? How do I write my script within it? On what basis I will write this script within it? Okay, so that's where all these things today I am going to explain you what happens here. So basically Lambda needs an trigger, as I mentioned earlier. Why it needs an trigger? This trigger is going to pass an input to Lambda in the form of events. Those events are in the form of JSONs. So basically it's need an event in the form of JSON. That's the answer for the second question, which you need to explain to the interviewer in very clear manner. Okay, so again, additionally, so if you again remember my last session where I explained about AWS config, event bridge and everything, okay, which is going to trigger an event in AWS. Okay, we discussed about one thing called config. So config is almost all, every time it's going to capture the event happening on AWS and it's going to send it to event bridge. Event bridge is going to evaluate those event and route to rules. Okay, it's going to route to rules. Okay, those rules, if it's evaluated, it's going to trigger an email, which is nothing but SNS. Okay, so Lambda can get a trigger either from directly from config or from event bridge, okay, or from SNS. Anywhere, whatever the things can be triggered, we can use Lambda. Okay, so in our use case, what I am going to do, so before SNS, before I send an email, I am going to pass this events to my Lambda. So here I am going to place my Lambda. My Lambda is going to evaluate certain condition here. So conditions. So based on this condition, if it is true, it's going to do some activity. If it is false, it's going to do some activity. I can have multiple conditions in my Lambda. So based on which it's going to trigger an SNS to multiple teams. Okay. Again here. So here also you need to know, before you write Lambda, you need to know what is the event is getting triggered and what is the type of the event and structure of the event in order to write effective Lambda code. Okay, great. So let's look into this in action so that you will much better understand what I am inferring here. Okay, let's go to our AWS console. Okay, so in AWS console, if you type Lambda, you get into this page. Okay, so let me give you an overview of what I am going to do now, especially, right? So whenever EC2 instance is created, okay, whenever any EC2 instance is created, it should have an BU tag. So it should have some tag called BU. Okay, if this is not present, I am going to send email to user. Okay, so this complete use case we will see tomorrow. Let me try to explain you how to first write a Lambda for this and how to test it, and then I will tell you how to add this to our exact use cases. Okay, let's go here. So again guys, keep in mind, any serverless services, you pay for what you use. Okay, if I am creating a function, let's take, if I am creating a function, it's a piece of code, correct? It is a piece of code. So where do this piece of code stay? It stay in AWS servers. Okay, so for this piece of code storage, I need to pay. And while executing this piece of code, it needs some memory, it needs some processing CPU and everything, right? For those, I am going to pay. Okay, so those are charged based on number of minutes or number of seconds it's getting executed. Okay, and there is a default timeout also. I will explain all those things probably like when we do. Okay, great. So there are two ways you can create, there are three ways basically you can create Lambda function. Let me just show you how to use Blueprint. Okay, Blueprint is nothing but there are certain functions which are already created by AWS which can use as a beginner. Okay, so for example, if you want to, like if you're learning any programming language, you go with Hello World, right? So there is an Hello World for Node.js. Okay, let me take some Python related example. And also one more important thing, right? So basically Lambda supports multiple programming languages. Okay, so yeah, like few to call out, right? So Lambda supports Go language. If you guys are very good at Go, you can use Lambda. If you guys are very good at Node.js, you can use Lambda. If you guys are very good at .NET, C Sharp especially, or PowerShell, you can use Lambda. Okay, basically for Windows servers, we go for .NET. If you guys are very good at Python, you can use Lambda. There are many more available. So that's why you see like this example somewhere related in Node.js, someone is related, something are related in Python. Okay, everything like. So let me take some example like Python, Hello World for Python. Let me give name as like, okay, Hello World. Okay, it's going to use Python 3.0. So see, whenever I select the example, it gives me that in which version of Python it's going to run. It means that the underlying server where is going to get executed, or underlying container where is going to execute it, it's going to use the Python 3.10. Okay, so and it says, okay, and one more important thing, right? Always I say in all my sessions, right? So any services in AWS to talk with another services, it's happen only through role. So if my Lambda needs to talk to any other services, either it can be a trigger which is going to trigger Lambda, or when my Lambda executes, it may generate some output, a log file. So where do those log files get saved? Because it's going to be saved in CloudWatch. Okay, basically Lambda will write its execution log to CloudWatch. So if you look it all together, okay, for storing your Lambda you need to pay. For that it getting executed, that amount of time when where it getting executed you need to pay, and the logs whatever is getting preserved in CloudWatch you are going to pay. So it's all serverless. So CloudWatch is again serverless where you are not maintaining. Lambda is serverless, you are not maintaining. So for everything you are going to pay. Okay, but you are not maintaining any of the servers on your own. It's all maintained by AWS, so that's why we call them as serverless. Okay, great. So as I mentioned, right, any services to talk with other services, it needs a role. So that's why it's saying whether you need to create a new role, or you have any policy template, or you want to use existing role. Okay, and it created a Lambda function here. So this is a simple script for hello world, it has given to us. So what it has given? Import JSON. Okay, basically it's similar to, as I mentioned, Python. So Python all import happen in JSON. So and as I mentioned, right, so Lambda needs a trigger and it gets everything in the form of JSON. So here the event is nothing but the JSON file, and context is something like which is getting invoking this particular Lambda. Okay, so event is going to be an JSON always. So that's why internally if you see, they are using like taking the key value in the form of JSON output. So if you want to really understand how these things are being written, you need to know basics of Python. Okay, but don't worry about that now. I am going to explain you how to handle that in by understanding it. Okay, I'm not going to teach you how to write Python, but how to understand and do whatever I am returning. Okay, so let's forget about this, and I don't want to create any function with like whatever has been default, like using blueprint. Let me show you how to start it from the scratch. How do you write the function from a scratch? So what is the function I am going to create? Okay, report EC2, report hyphen EC2 with no tags. So basically no app tag or BU tag, no BU tags. So basically I am going to report the EC2 whatever is getting created, and it does not have a BU tag. So runtime. So in which language I am going to run this particular function? So as I mentioned, I am going to use Python. So I am selecting Python 11. Okay, you will see all the runtimes, right? .NET, Go, Java, Node, Python, Ruby, and everything. So if you want the other versions, it's also given here. So let me go with Python 11. So the architecture of the system. So I am saying like in which architecture system my code has to run. I am saying x86, or it's that AMD or AM processor. Okay. So and execution rule. So let's say like okay, create new role with basic Lambda permission. Let's see what's it doing, and then we will see how to do the changes to that. Let me create a function. Okay, great. So if you look at the overview of the function which I created now, I have a Lambda function, but it does not have any trigger. So it cannot run automatically. It just wait for our instruction. So it does not run automatically. So it needs a trigger to run automatically. And Lambda function also can send or call any other services in AWS. So that's why we have a destination. Okay, great. So coming to our code, okay, see now it given me a basic hello world program here. Okay, simple. Let me test that and see what's the output. See, you guys understand, right? If I want to test, I need an event, because in the form of JSON, then only I can test it, because without that Lambda cannot run, as I mentioned. So if I want to test it, I need to create a sample event first, because I do not have trigger. If I have a trigger, I can use this trigger to trigger this by passing a JSON from this trigger to my Lambda. But right now I do not have a trigger, so I am going to kind of create it on my own. So basically a unit testing which I am going to do before even like actually testing it, right? So Let me create an event. So configure test event. Okay, create new event. Event name is like, okay, like capture EC2 instance event. So whenever okay, let me keep it instant. So basically it's going to capture EC2 instance creation process. Okay, so it's giving the template. So basically, if you remember my earlier sessions, okay, if you remember my earlier sessions, I have explained this again. Let me say it again. So config is the one which is going to capture all the events in AWS. Okay, config. Okay, and it's going to send it to event bridge. So where do I get an event? I get an event from config. So what should I select here? Template. I will select a config. So the same. Whenever any item change notification, anything like created or updated, whatever happens to this, let me know the status of it. So I'm going to select this. So when I select this, see config is automatically given a sample JSON. Okay, let me copy this JSON and maybe I will create a new file in my folder. Sample maybe config JSON. So I'm going to paste it here. So before we know, we need to understand what is there in the config JSON. See, in config JSON, basically it has something like invoking event. So as I mentioned, config is going to capture all the events happening on AWS. It gives the invoking event. It can be EC2, it can be S3, it can be Lambda. Again, it can be config itself, or it can be any other thing. Okay, S3 buckets, whatever, right? So you can do anything. Delete. Everything is an event. User login is again an event. So every event will be captured in invoking event. So that equivalent JSON file will be given here. Okay, and so basically if you have any rules or any tokens, everything, this is like related to config basically, which we really don't worry about it. Okay, so we really bother about invoking event. What is the event is which is getting invoked? So in our example, if you look closely, look at that example, the invoking event will have an resource. See, resource creation time is there, right? Same way there will be resource. Based on the resource ARN, you can find it. See, from the ARN, I know this is a EC2 which is getting created for sample. So it's all like kind of a sample which that gives to us, right? So this is a ARN of my EC2 instances which is getting created. In the region, it got created in US East 1. So everything has been given to us. So basically, it's an EC2 creation. Basically, it's an EIP. Basically, Elastic IP is also assigned to that EC2, and basically, this is for EC2. Okay, now for this particular event, I am going to find whether tag is getting assigned or not. If it has tag of type BU, okay, if it's not there, then I'm going to raise a request. For example, see it says resource type AWS EC2 instance, means that it's an EC2 instance and it has a tag of foo bar. Okay, there is no tag called BU. You guys see that there is a no tag called BU, but I am checking for the availability of tag BU. Okay, let's use the same example and see how it works, and then we will do few tweaking around and then do the changes. Okay, let me save this event for now. Okay, now that particular JSON, whatever the JSON which I shown you, is going to come as event. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to make it as event. Okay, let's deploy this code, because like whenever you change, this needs to be deployed because that needs to be there on the server of AWS so that you can run it. So I'm going to deploy it. So let me test it. So, okay, great. So when I tested it, I got the JSON whichever I was showing you earlier in the body. Okay, great. So let me try to read the properties of invoking event. Okay, how am I going to do? Okay, invoking event. How am I going to do? Event dot get, let me go here, let me copy this. So basically in Python, if you give that, it's going to read a value from your dictionary. Okay, the in or JSON, whatever you call it as. Basically in Python we call it as a dictionary, right? So let me deploy it. Oh, sorry, I should not have deployed it. Let me print, or maybe I will show in the invoking event. Yeah. Okay, deploy test. Okay, now if you see, I got an success response where my body contains a string. Okay, basically it's a string, correct? Okay, if you want to, guys, if you are following me, earlier my JSON was this. This is the original event which is sent to me. In that I am focusing on invoking event, and I got this particular value now. Okay, with this value I need to search and find, okay, whether tag is there or not. Okay, that's how my coding goes. Okay, so to better understand, I'm doing it in very simple way. Okay, now here what should I do now? So I got an invoking event. Okay, so basically the output of this event dot get invoking event is a string. That's what you are seeing it, right? It's getting enclosed with double quotes and it has like all string. So I need to convert this to a dictionary or a JSON. Okay, so that I can do further processing. Okay, so what I am going to do, there is a function called JSON.loads. Okay, which converts string to a dictionary, basically string to a JSON file. Basically it converts a string to a JSON file. Okay, so let's see how the output is now. Okay, now you see the perfect formatted output. Earlier it was a string, now it's a JSON, so you get a perfect formatting. So now you can easily understand what are the things have been given in configuration item. So now I have a configuration item. Under configuration item I was like many properties. Okay, here there is a tags which I am really focused on, which is nothing but instance tag. Okay, in this instance tag I need to check if it is as BU. Okay, great. So let's see how to do that. Okay, fetch tags. Okay, for example, here what I did, if I want to get the value of invoking event, how did I did? Event dot get. Okay, now I need to get the value of configuration item. So how do I do? Let me copy this. Dot get configuration item. Oh shoot, I need to copy this. Okay, let us see fetch tags now. Okay, now if you see, now I do not have any configuration item anymore. I directly got the values within it. Okay, so I need to process it again. So if I want to process the sub values of configuration item, I can directly go with, okay, I can either go with the dot get again, or I can go with array. Okay, there is an importance of dot get and using of this. Okay, when you use dot get, okay, for example, if this particular invoking event does not present in your JSON, it just return null. Okay, if you go with this kind of square bracket terminology, it's going to say that this particular tag does not found. Okay, that's where. So for simplicity, I'm just using tags here. Again, I will use dot get so that you will understand. So now let's see what is the output. See, basically, guys, we do all these things in our local. Okay, I will copy this event file and do that in local, because as I mentioned, for every execution the amount of CPU and RAM you are using, you are going to pay for that. If you see, duration 1.81 milliseconds, build duration totally on an average I am going to build for 2 milliseconds, and it's using the memory of 128 MB max. Use is 40, so I have allocated with 120 MB max and I used only 40 MB in init duration. So I am going to charge for all these things and I am going to pay for this. Okay, so I am paying for this. So if you guys test it in your account, just do everything in VS Code first and then do it here. Okay, do not try as I am doing, because I want to show you guys very clearly I am doing everything in Lambda itself, how I do for understanding. Okay, got it? Okay, so now I have a tags. Now if you see the execution results, I have a tag. So inside the tag there is something called foo. Okay, let me try to print this foo just to see what is the value of that, right? Okay, so okay, see the value of foo is nothing but bar. So that particular tag has been set to a value called bar. So what is my intention now? My intention is to check for bu tag. Okay, let's see what happens now. So I am checking whether any tag called bu present for this particular EC2 instance which is created. Oh man, I got an error. So if you see, the error is nothing but key error. So this is what I was explaining a couple of minutes back. When you get, when you use get function in JSON, you don't get key error. Okay, when you follow this notation, basically how do you can do this also, right? Okay, let me deploy this. Okay, see, now what I did, I was just reading invoking event of configuration item. Inside configuration item, there is something called tags. Inside that tag, there is something called foo. So I am saying get me the value of this. So if I do that, it's going to return me the result. Okay, I didn't. Okay, I am getting the result called bar. So what happens with this? What is the issue with this? The issue with this is if I change the something which is not available in my JSON. Okay, sorry. If something which is not available in my JSON, it's going to error out saying that the key is not found. So that's the behavior when you use this particular standard. Okay. So how do I overcome this? There is a better way to do that in Python. So if I want to get and if I suspect something might not be available, okay, basically the general structure, right? See, the general structure of that particular configuration item will be same always, but the tags or the name or whatever the user input, whatever you can give in AWS services, there is a chance that it might not there in all the files. So in those cases where you suspect that, okay, you might not have all these things, you can go with get. So in my case, bu might be there or might not be there. If it's not there, it should not fail, it should say that okay, none, so that I will error out saying that okay, this particular EC2 does not have a bu tag in it. Okay, let's see what's coming. Okay, see, if now it's not failing, now it's saying null. Basically it says means that bu tag does not exist in the sample event which we created. Okay, got it? Okay, so now what I can do, it's very simple going forward, right? I will do that. Okay, if fetch tag is not none. This is the command in Python, right? Basically, it's a syntax in Python to check whether the variable is none or not. Okay, basically, I'm saying if it is not none, I am saying like, okay, return this. Okay, so if it is not none, do this. If it is none, like I'm saying like body. So you can even raise an SNS alert. Raise SNS alert. So I am just giving a string now. Okay, whenever I get raise an SNS alert, it means that I don't have BU tag. If I have a BU tag, it just gives you the value of that. Okay, I am going to remove this also. I don't want this to be there anymore status because it's not nowhere used. Okay, let me save this. Okay, let me deploy this change. So basically, if BU tag is there, it should print the value of the BU tag. If BU tag is not there, it will going to raise SNS alert. So what is the output you are getting? Raise SNS alert. It means that the BU tag does not exist on the particular event which is getting triggered. Okay. So for how to raise an SNS alert and everything, I will show you tomorrow. There is an function called the Boto3 client where you need to configure that and everything, which I don't want to confuse you guys in the day one itself. Okay. So now I checked one use case. Okay. Hey Kumar, like, is there like I can configure my event to add a BU tag and test? Yes, you can. So let's go to the configure event. Okay, let's go to the tag session. Tag session of the EC2 basically. So there will be two tags here. One is EC2 tag and another one is EIP, Elastic IP address tag. You should be very much clear on which tag you are doing. So this is EC2 tag, resource type EC2 instance and its tag. So I am going to add one more. Okay, what tag I am going to add? It's like BU. Let me copy this. Okay, I'm going to change this to BU. Okay, and the value is like payroll. Okay, now I have added an event which is going to as a BU tag. Now it should say payroll is that one. Okay, so I have saved it. Let me test it now. Now it should come here and say BU tag as payroll. So I am not going to take any action here. So here if it comes, I need to add few more logic to send an SNS alert to the user. Okay, you guys got it? So the same way, whenever any EC2 instance created, so this code will work for any EC2 instance created, and I can check if any specific tags exist or not. So like this, there are many logics you can create in Lambda. The only one important thing you need to understand is that the structure of your event. Okay, if you understand the structure of the event, you can write a code as long as you are based on your expertise in Python or Node.js or in Go or whatever it is. Okay, guys. So with this, I am going to. Okay, one more thing is I want to forget to explain. So I said trigger, which is going to send the event, which I am showing you like how to do that. So whenever I execute, see, whenever I executed, I got execution result. So I got some log and everything, right? So where do I see all this log? If I want to check for my previous logs, where do I see? I said it's going to write to CloudWatch. So if you go here, view CloudWatch logs. So whenever it's getting created, okay, whenever it's getting created, a log group will be automatically created. Okay, under the log group, if you see for every execution, it writes everything. So for example, this one. Okay, so if you open, okay, Lambda USS version 2. Okay, you have a build time, everything. You will have the results also. Somewhere 1 second. 2. Okay. Okay. Key error BU not found. You see, right? So all your errors. Okay. So all your error logs you can see here. So when I created a BU like this, so it's triggered an error. So basically you will see all the errors are captured in your log group. Okay, CloudWatch. Okay, and one more important thing I forgot to mention you, which is nothing but the trigger part. So right now I haven't created any trigger. Okay, that's why my Lambda is nowhere communicating with any other services. Okay, it's communicating to CloudWatch again. Yes, it's communicating to CloudWatch. So for CloudWatch it might have an IAM role created automatically. So while I was creating, I was saying, right, create your IAM role. So if you go to roles, oh, where it is, where, yeah. So if you see report EC2 with BU tag role, so this is a role it created. If you check this role, it will have only one role for now. So it has only one role, which is going to access CloudWatch for creating the logs and put the log events in the cloud stream, log stream. So it has only two permissions given. So okay, to create a log group and put the events in the log stream, that's it. So but if you look at our architecture, it needs to read an event from cloud config or event bridge. Okay, so I will add an event bridge here and grant access to that event bridge to read the logs, or config I will add here and I will ask you to read that config. So I need to create one more policy to this existing one. Okay, with all those things I will show in our next session. Please keep watching. If you feel that okay, this is helpful, just try to share with your friends and give a thumbs up, which motivates us. Okay, thanks for watching.